starting with my own family, but so many people beyond that have shared knowledge and skills and tips and tricks that why would I keep what knowledge I have to myself? There's no fun in that. A, then that knowledge doesn't grow. And B, people that might not have access to figuring it out on their own, they don't grow. And that's no good. I mean, especially in the world that we live in now where there is such a shortage of skilled labor, skilled trades, and that's, while not directly impacted by the maker community, it is an indirect result. Someone in the communities spends a couple years really getting the ins and outs of welding or carpentry or what have you, and they think to themselves, maybe this is something I want to do. And now, fast forward a few years, and now they've got their own business, or now they're adding to the workforce in a very constructive way. So why gatekeep?
No. Welcome back to Create and Connect podcast. I'm your host, Tom, from the Phoenix Woodshop. Today, I'm excited to talk with Lucas D'Angelo, known on Instagram as Man Made in Massachusetts, MA. He's a fabricator and machinist running a full shop in Massachusetts, and his specialty is stuff other people overlook. Small run jobs, custom repairs, vintage machinery nobody else wants to touch. He takes it on and he makes it work. What gets me about Lucas's craft is the problem solving. Hoisting a Bridgepoint mill into his basement with a homemade crane, breathing new life into machines that look like scrap to anyone else, that takes a different kind of mind. A genuine skill, genuine excitement for work, and a real eye for turning the impossible job into a finished one. He's the friend you want on speed dial to get the job done. He's a strong presence in the maker community and at Maker Camp. Lucas, thanks for joining me, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. That was I'm going to hire you for everything now. That was like the best intro I've ever heard. Thank you. It's
You're
great
welcome.
to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So let's talk about making. When did you discover yourself as a maker?
I guess before I knew that was a term for it, I suppose. I have my background family-wise is my mother's side of the family, the Man family with two N's, which is where the man-made comes from.
Thank you for introducing that, because
yes.
I had a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. So my mother's side of the family is the Man family, and her dad, my grandfather, was while not by trade, craftsman, he was by interest and by hobby, and a little bit by necessity, a craftsman. And, out of his 4 kids, his 2 sons are also my uncles, the same, also fine craftsmen in their own right. And so growing up, I was around that family a lot and was always, as a result, around tools and discussions of carpentry and construction. And so that really was just sort of a normal thing for me to be around. And as soon as I was old enough to, in their eyes, use tools and be shown how to safely use them, they put me in front of whatever tools they had or whatever projects we were doing. So I've been, working with my hands quite a long time, regardless of whether it was sort of something that I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. It was just, oh yeah, we do this when I go visit them. We get on the lathe and we make pens, or we do some trim and, learn how to do miters and stuff like that. And, so as a result, I was in front of a lathe making pens when I was, I think, 5 or 6. And so while I haven't made a pen in arguably decades, nor have I been in front of a wood lathe in probably a good decade, that was where it all started for me. And when I kind of took it to the next level was about 10 years ago, when I moved into my current, bought my current house, moved into my current shop and said, I've got space. This is my place. I can do whatever I want with it and make it as, jam-packed with stuff as I've always dreamed of, in a good or bad way. And so that was when the brand was born, beginning of 2017. And that was when it kind of went to I think I want to try and do something with this beyond my own interests and hobbies. And it's been going strong ever since.
So you're working for yourself?
Yeah, I do have a day job. I call it my job. That's a 5-day a week, 50 or 60 hours a week job that I've held for close to 15 years now. Same job. And alongside that, I do have my own business, which up until this year was just really truly just a side hustle. And this year decided to make it official and, actually start a real LLC, a real business, and, go legit with it. Not that I wasn't before, but like really go legit with it. So kicked that off this year. So I've got my job, and then my job, and then my hobbies, which are, the projects that don't pay a dime, cost me a fortune, and are just labors of love. But yes, that is the full-time schedule that I've created for myself. And I don't think I would have it any other way. I'm not really good at downtime, so I like to stay busy. And that was how I did it.
You seem to really be weaving it all together. The maker part, the grind, and the hobbies.
I'm very fortunate that the guy that I work for, my boss that I've been with for, like I said, almost 15 years, he is a huge supporter of what I do outside of my job. And he is very much someone that says, I might say, hey, I got this opportunity to do such and such, whether it's a big paid gig in my own business or an opportunity to go travel and do some really cool, fabrication and project work, at like for Travis Pastrana at his house. And whether it's that or a job, he's always one to say, do it. You need a week off to do this, take the week, take the time you need. He's very supportive of my own business and my passions. And so I don't think I would have accomplished what I've accomplished or been able to weave it together the way I have without him being as supportive and as, enthusiastic as he is. So I'm definitely very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you have some really strong people around you and behind you. That's awesome.
Yeah, very lucky.
So your progression is carpentry into metalwork or machinery. What do you like to work on if you don't have to work?
Yeah, I'd say it's like a 70-30, where the 70% of stuff that I like to work on, if it's not work, is metal, machining, machinery. I think really that is my number one passion, is just working with metal, fixing old machines, which fixing old machines encompasses working with metal, welding, machining. And that was kind of how those skill sets came to be. But the 30% is carpentry, because, I do still really have a love for carpentry, whether it be rough carpentry, framing work, or finished carpentry. I really enjoy it. It is definitely not something I would want to do all day, every day. And I am fortunate that I don't have to. I do, a certain amount of it at my day job, but it's the right amount so that I still really enjoy it and I don't feel burned out on it. And I can, also be able to do all the metal stuff that I really enjoy. My day job keeps it totally, it's totally a mix of all facets of, really, I guess, of making. And we don't call it that necessarily, but that's what it is making. And repairing and fixing. So when I'm not getting paid for something, I still get the urges for carpentry, and, so I'll tackle little projects around the house, or, I'm going to retrim the bathroom today, and the rest of the time I'm down here in the basement, cutting stuff up and putting it back together.
So when did you discover the maker community, and when did you realize that you were a part of it?
It's interesting because I would say, and this is oddly enough really nothing to do with COVID, but it was around that time. So I got on Instagram early on, like 2011 or 12. But, that was just share pictures of, the burrito you're eating for lunch, or, you're like, that was what Instagram was, right? And in 2017, when, I sort of branded as the Man Made, and, I switched my personal Instagram account to that and just started posting the little stuff that I was working on. At that time I was kind of setting up this shop and, just posting that kind of stuff. The first community that I found on Instagram was really the contractors, the commercial construction industry, and not really at all the maker world that is so central to our world now. And so I got, really in depth in that sort of contractor and, builder world, and made a lot of friends, and that I am still really good friends with today. And, was amazed at how big that community was on Instagram. And then in 2020, Clubhouse was sort of the catalyst, I think, for discovering the makers. And that is, just to keep it brief, that is a audio-based chat app that is sort of like the old school party lines, where you can go into the app and there's all these rooms, all these, rooms of people talking about anything in the world, and there's people listening, there's people talking, and it's just a live discussion app. And there was a little tiny corner of that was a whole bunch of makers from all over the place that would all just spend literally days at once, days in a row, talking about what was going on in the shop. Oh, I'm working on this and I got a question, and what would you do? And that led me to all these people's Instagram accounts, and that was sort of the wow, there's a huge world out here. I mean, there were a few people that I knew of and were friends with prior to that in this community, but I didn't really know the extent of it. And so let's say right around then in 2020, 2021 was when I discovered how extensive the group of makers were. And 21 was the first year I went to Maker Camp, and boy, it just snowballed, like crazy from there. And I met all these people that I am now really good, close friends with that have, introduced me to other people and things and techniques and skills that I never had or I probably would have been aware of prior.
Yeah, it's a great resource of not just friendship, but of knowledge and
unbelievable.
Especially when you have somebody who's been doing it for 20, 30 years, and then they can just show you, if you're doing welding, just try it like this. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I did notice that, I think it was last year when Lincoln, who is sponsoring the welding tent at Maker Camp, somehow you lost the welding competition to a cheater. I'm not exactly sure if that's kind of how I heard the story. I'm not sure.
Listen, there was no one there realistically that would have beat him. It's just, there's no way. There's no way. I know you've had him on this podcast before, and for anyone that's listened, there's no one can touch that guy in any of this stuff. And the funniest part is he'll be the last person to tell you that. He'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Boy, does he. So all's fair. I'll get him this year.
Were you automatically disqualified because you were teaching at the camp? Like you
yeah, I mean, I'm not right. I'm not a real contestant there. I'll give it a crack, but there was no way I was good. Because what am I can't win that. What do you know? That's like
conflict of interest.
Yeah, at the very least, So we just participate for fun. But
I mean, you have a ringer come in and he just takes the whole thing. That's like Babe Ruth going to play in a little league.
It really is. Yeah, that was. But I mean, we didn't say that everyone can participate except for Dave. I mean, that wouldn't have been fair. But I think we'll do that this year. I think we're gonna have a big exclusion on the banner in parentheses, except for Dave.
I mean, he was so good, he got fired from his own job, and he had to create his own business.
I know, and the funny thing about it is he'll get all the same people that he worked for still working for him. It's not the business. It's not the owner of the company. It's the guy that's doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, the connection of people and what makes community of, you're able to laugh it off. You're able to embrace everybody's success. And I like how Jimmy DeRestis says, all the boats rise with the tide. So why not let everybody rise? And also gatekeeping, like you're going to keep information to make somebody else successful, because if they become successful, you become successful.
Exactly. I think back to, because I've always been a proponent of sharing what I know, whether it be a little or a lot. I want to share it because so many people have shared with me over the years, starting with my own family, but so many people beyond that have shared knowledge and skills and tips and tricks that why would I keep what knowledge I have to myself. There's no fun in that. A, then that knowledge doesn't grow. And B, people that might not have access to figuring it out on their own, they don't grow. And that's no good. I mean, especially in the world that we live in now where there is such a shortage of skilled labor, skilled trades, and that's, while not directly impacted by the maker community, it is an indirect result. Someone in the communities spends a couple years really getting the ins and outs of welding or carpentry or what have you, and they think to themselves, maybe this is something I want to do. And now, fast forward a few years, and now they've got their own business, or now they're adding to the workforce in a very constructive way. So why gatekeep? And I think back a couple of years ago, well, it's more than a couple now, but 2021 was, in Clubhouse, as I was talking about, there was an older gentleman from the West Coast that was a woodworker, a fine one of the best custom woodworkers, like radial millwork, really amazing level stuff. And he was very much a gatekeeper, not sort of maliciously or intentionally, but just sort of, it was the way that he'd always been brought up, or the environments he was in, where you had a skill that was your skill and that was your job security. So you don't share that with anybody. And I remember talking to him about that, and he was like, well, that's I figured that out. You're going to have to figure that out on your own. And I said, well, that doesn't really do either of us any good. I said, I'm not taking your business. I'm on the East Coast. You're on the West Coast. I said, there's no overlap here. I said, but think of all the years it took you to figure this stuff out. And go back all those years and imagine if you had a couple of, imagine where you'd be now. And it took him a while to kind of understand that, because it wasn't just me saying that to him, but it took him a while but I mean, after some time and, kind of thinking about it, he basically said, geez, you're right. I'm not getting any younger. Why not share what I have? And when he retired from his his job, which was his company doing all this millwork, he actually joined a local makerspace and started teaching.
Wow.
And I think that is wonderful, because he had so many skills that would have, been lost otherwise. So the ability to teach and share is paramount to this entire community.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, with kind of crowdsourcing other people, when somebody comes in just to take and everybody else is sharing and freely giving, it's like a farmer. You can't take all the seeds home and just leave them in your barn. Right. You got to work with it, and then you need people to help you out.
Yeah, it's and what's interesting too is you have that instance every now and then where someone comes into the group, or a group of givers and teachers, and they come in as a taker, and it's not like they are immediately thrown out or chastised for it, but it's interesting how quickly that can shift. Being around the people that are the givers and the teachers can really shift your perspective very quickly, which is great.
Self-knowledge of, like, I need to get on board, or the other people are going to say, if you're going to take, you're not.
Right. See you later. There's a table for you over there, Yeah. So I think we all do a really good job of inspiring other people to share the knowledge and continue to grow and, help the communal knowledge.
Who do you find as your inspiration? Because other than family, who do you find in the maker community that is getting you to grow?
Long term, it's always been Chrisette. We've been friends for a long time, probably 16 years, 17 years. And
how'd you get to meet him if he's on Long Island?
Well, it's funny. So he's going way back to the college days. He came to Boston to go to college at the School for the Museum of Fine Arts. And so he's got his art degree, and that's kind of always what his background, or sort of deep rooted skill sets kind of have been in, is creating art. Even now with his business, he does a lot of art installations and a lot of sculptural work. But he went to the School for the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and he, like myself, growing up, him on Long Island, me here in Eastern Massachusetts, we rode the little bikes, the BMX bikes. We were avid BMX guys. And so he came up here to go to school and found, all these people that ride in Boston. And there was actually a BMX shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Timeless BMX that was sort of the hub. You know what it was? It was like the Blackthorn Resort of BMX, right? Where that was where it really was. I mean, that's where the community got together to hang out and, meet up to go out and ride, or, spend, get together and spend, hours watching BMX videos, or taking apart our bikes and putting them back together with new parts and all that. And so that was sort of the hub, and that's where we met. And, along with, dozens and dozens of other guys and, doing the same thing. And so we became really good friends, and we would go out and ride with the whole big group every weekend. And so when he finished school and went back to Long Island, we stayed good friends. I'd go down there, he'd be back up here. And so, watching him sort of grow his business from from a little 2-machine shop in his garage. Well, actually, let me go back further. In his apartment in Boston, literally like a 3rd or 4th floor apartment in Boston, right, within sight of Fenway Park, his bedroom was like 2/3 a shop. Like he had like a bed with a shower curtain on some bent conduit that would like go around the bed to block the bed off, and then it was just all like workbenches and so like he had stuff going on, in this little tiny apartment in Boston. So just kind of having watched his progression and his skills grow and his business grow has really always kind of inspired me to kind of follow along in a similar path. And I think I've done that, but I have always looked to him for advice on stuff. What would you do? How would you do this? Is this even like, how would you charge for this? So he's always been a really good resource and a really good friend. And I admire the heck out of his just career path and personal life path. And I say that I don't like to have downtime. I like to stay busy. And by comparison to him, I feel like I accomplish nothing. Like that guy is doing it all, day job, business, personal life, having kids. And so he's always been a big inspiration and a great resource, to me for many years. On the more recent side of things, I mean, let's bring him up again. Dave, he's 8 minutes away from me, and oddly enough, met him because of Austin at MakerCamp. But, we were 8 minutes away and had no idea, but he is one of the best welders and fabricators I've ever met. And so he is a huge resource. Like, Dave, I'm not really sure why this metal isn't sticking to this metal, or I'm not sure. Well, if you turn the dial on the welder a quarter turn back, and then you turn this one forward, and then you press these 2 buttons together at the same time, and you look to your left, it'll be perfect. Like, that's like, he's got that just on tap. And, so he's a unbelievable resource for just, advice, questions. And, I like to think I have a lot of stuff in my shop and a lot of equipment and tools to do what I need to do. And if there's any time that I find myself not having something, I'll tell you what, Dave's got it and then some, so so he's one of the people that I have been looking up to since I met him a couple of years ago.
That's awesome. And it's amazing. Like, you're right down the block from one another, and he's, so far away because you don't know him. And then it takes something like MakerCamp to meet him and realize, oh, you're right down the block. And then now you've got, an extension of tools available.
Yeah, and I keep telling him, I'm like, you ever need something, and one of these days, I hope he needs something. I hope I can help him out the same way. But yeah, it was funny. He in his previous career, he was in the greater Boston area a lot working, and it was just a funny thing that happened within like 2 days of each other. So my day job, I'll keep it brief. My day job is I work for a guy who owns a bunch of Ace Hardware stores and also owns all, commercial and residential real estate. So I manage all of the properties, commercial and residential, with the construction, repairs, maintenance. I deal with all the, the hardware store equipment, forklifts and pallet jacks and trucks, and do all the maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's funny because some of my connections from my own life have spilled over into that a little bit. So that company, the metals, K&S Metals, K&S Precision Metals. I know Ted, who runs that company. And so hardware stores have always been their bread and butter. But they had I said, Ted, I need one of these new displays for the stores, just I can talk to him about it. And he actually kind of surprised me and sent us one of the displays that was Jimmy's display, which was just kind of funny, so someone that I know, and people at the store, they don't really know any, but it's just funny to have, a Duresta edition display, he signed them all. It's just kind of funny. But So I remember we got that, and a day or so later, I see Jimmy on Instagram. Jimmy's reposted someone's story of that, and I'm like, that's the one that's in my store. Like, who is this? Who is this guy? DTB Fabrication. And I clicked on it. I looked, and I was like, oh, like he looks like he's kind of around here. And I would say about a day later, Austin Maker Camp calls me. He's like, hey, would you do me a favor? I'm like, yeah, what's up? He's like, there's a guy that wants to give us a Bridgeport for the Maker Camp makerspace, and I think he's pretty close to you. He's like, could we make a deal where you could pick it up and bring it up here next time? I said, yeah, of course. Give me the guy's info. It was Dave. And I'm like, oh, this is the guy that I just saw. He was just at my store the other day, getting some stuff, and saw this. And I started talking to him, and I said, where do you live? And he told me. I'm like, oh, you're like 8 minutes away from me. And he was like, really? So I went over there to get the Bridgeport, and that was, the rest is history. But it was just, the little small world, where.
Yeah, meant to happen. Those little, coincidences or God moments. And it's like he was meant to be in your life. And, Dave is such a great resource. Jimmy's so positive and pumping everybody up. And then Austin, pulling everybody together, having the space of the Blackthorn Resort. The Blackthorn Resort is, a unique spot. But when it becomes Maker Camp, it's completely different. And I went to Workbench Con, and I was hoping to get what we got at Maker Camp. And because it was in the hotel, you can't do that. It just you have a lot of restrictions inside a conference hall.
Yes, quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And on the flip side, you have to deal with weather at Maker Camp.
Yes.
So it could be cold, it could be wet, but
it could be both.
It could be both.
Really badly.
Yeah. It could be hot, but it's great that all these people just come together, and it's just woven, and you see how it builds on everything, and how your life becomes enriched, your friendship becomes enriched, and it's because you're connecting with all these people, and you get to grow professionally, personally, and it's really amazing. They say you're the average of the 5 people who you surround yourself by. Well, you can pick some pretty good 5 people in that spot. And, when you go to Maker Camp and I say it's like going to Disney World. You're not going to be able to do everything. There's a lot of lines. And if you're trying to take a class with Dennis Forrester, you might not get in. So, he'll just straight arm you and say, yeah, it's full. Can't help
sorry. Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah.
He's real strict, that guy.
But you have, all these people, and once you start talking to them, you realize how much you have in common with them, how inspirational they are, and you can get motivated. Like, I saw Austin at the Weaver Leather Supply, and they collaborated with one another, and they had the intensive, and I ended up taking this bag making class and working with some women that were there that weren't even presenters, were seamstress, and the way that they moved on a sewing machine, it was like it was like watching a ballet. It was just so beautiful the way that they worked on the machine. So that in itself is inspirational. Like, I don't own a sewing machine, but now having seen it and worked with it, I was like, you know what, this could be pretty cool, because you see Jimmy put a video of he made his own vest or his own jacket. I have the ability to do it. So it's just a matter of finding that sewing machine, and then of course time,
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say, what, you're exactly right. You have the abilities and the skill sets to do anything you want. You just haven't unlocked them yet. You know what I mean? And I think it's so wonderful to have something like that Weaver event where it's sort of a spin-off of Maker Camp, but a spin-off with a focus. So, you didn't get to take that class with Dennis at Maker Camp because there's so much going on and so many people there. Well, maybe you take a trip over to Ohio and you get a much more in-depth, much more personal experience where you get to take that class with Dennis amongst others, and you get a similar experience in the sense of learning and gaining knowledge and being surrounded by knowledge, but in a much more intimate, smaller, focused setting. And I think that's a really cool way to do it, a really cool opportunity that we've created by having it. I was going to ask you how it went because I saw that you had gone, and I wanted to go this year, and a couple of things didn't quite work out, but it looked like it was a killer event.
Yeah, and that's the maker community seems to be just growing in abundance, and it's connecting so many people. Like I see you've gone to FabTech, and Dave talked about going to FabTech. I would love to get there. There's so many things and so many places you can't do it all.
No, it's tough.
And then they just had a maker challenge down in Maryland, and I saw that go on and following people. And, you know, if you get FOMO because, oh, I didn't get to go, you can't do it all. You know, it's like Disney World again. You can't go every year. You can't do it all. And yeah, you know, just enjoy what you are experiencing. And I like that Austin extended Maker Camp into the winter intensives, because that's where, you know, I got to meet Dre and focus on epoxy because I kept messing it up. And, you know, she's, you know, extremely talented and very patient. And, you know, I was able to learn in a smaller setting with like-minded people, and you get those 5 people around you, you're going to elevate. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's the ability that Austin has to sort of, you know, dream up these things and then, you know, act on it and, you know, make it happen is so nice. Like, you know, to have those winter intensives and to not really have to be like, oh, where are we going to do it? No, we have a space. Oh, we'll just build a makerspace, you know, great, you know. And then for his father to be like, you know, I kind of want to build this building. And Austin's like, great, another makerspace. Let's build it, you know, to have the facilities to do it and to have the, you know, the drive to do it, to give people the opportunity to really focus in, you know, kind of like you said, I had never used a sewing machine. It was kind of one of those things I was like, someday I'll learn. You know, my mother and my grandmother were fantastic seamstresses, you know, just by, you know, my grandmother out of necessity and my mom sort of the same way. You know, my grandmother grew up in a really rural area in Missouri. And so it was, you make everything, right? And so growing up watching them sew, I was like, you know, someday I'm going to learn. And so a couple of years ago, I went to my first leather intensive at one of the winter classes that Ethan and Dennis were teaching. And they had one of those beautiful big old Weaver leather sewing machines. So while it's not the exact same as, you know, the Singer that, you know, with the treadle that my grandmother used, it was still the same principle of, let me see how this thing works. You know, like, let me understand the magic behind the sewing machine. Because if you don't know, man, that is like a magical device. Like, it doesn't make sense how it works, but it works. But so, you know, Dennis and Ethan showed me how to use it. And by the end of that weekend, I was, you know, buzzing stuff out on the sewing machine. And I was like, okay, I think it's time. I got to figure this out. You know, and I went home with all gung-ho, like, I'm getting a sewing machine. And, you know, and then, of course, like, life picks right back up. And so... like, you know, at the end of last year, I finally got a sewing machine. And have I really sat down a long time to use it yet? No. Have I got it set up? I did get it set up. But, like, you know, I never would have even got it set up or whatever if I didn't take the intensive that put me in front of a sewing machine for the first time with you can do this. Here's how it works. Just try it out, you know. So it really does open your mind up and open your world up to things that you probably never would have gotten into. So it's been a lot of fun. You know, I've always kind of limited myself, not intentionally, but just sort of it's sort of happenstance to wood and metal. But being able to take some of these other classes like the leather one, or heck, just meeting Dre, you know, opened me up to epoxy. One of the first questions she asked me, you know, before, I think it might have even been before we actually met in person. She's like, have you ever used epoxy before? And I was like, yep. She's like, oh, what do you make? I'm like, well, I mean, it's like glue. Like, I used it for what it's for. Like, I used, you know, a high performance epoxy to laminate wood together, you know, making a beam or whatever. She's like, oh, so you've never done like cool stuff with epoxy? I was like, no, I've never done cool stuff with epoxy. And I didn't really even, you know much of that world, you know, that world's existence. So, you know, it's the little things, like, it really opens your mind up and shows you multiple things you can do with one product, but it also, I think, opens your mind up to thinking that way about other stuff. So even if it's not something that you've explicitly been in front of or been taught or been shown how to use, now your brain thinks that way. And you're like, oh, well, you know, I know this is the normal use of this, but I bet you I could do this. So even if it's not a direct, you know, skill set that you've learned, it sets you up for such success throughout your creative making journey.
Yeah, the creativity, allowing yourself to explore the possibility of what if we take this to here, will it work? How can we make it work? It can be done. And it's really nice to know that even if there's something that you're interested in, going to Maker Camp, because there's so many different presenters there and there's so many different opportunities to learn, and they have the tools and the right instructor. So you may have YouTube, but you don't have the tools. Or you may have the tool, but you're using YouTube and that person can't instruct you along. You got to send an email or a DM and try to figure it out. But that's why I liked going to the Weaver event or the winter intensives, because I'm not necessarily going to invest a few $1,000s in the top of the line sewing machine.
Of course.
But like Patty Brooklyn said, don't even buy a sewing machine. People are giving them away all the time. So go on Facebook Market, see what's available, and when or they have Curb Appeal is another website where people are just like, I'm getting rid of this. So I was actually picking my wife up from the train station, and I drove right past a Singer sewing machine, a foot pedal one. That was the exact one that my grandmother had. So my sister has my grandmother's Singer sewer, foot pedal, the whole spin. And it's like, was it Chris Chops who does everything without electric?
Right.
So I went around the corner, I threw it in the trunk, and then I went and I picked up my wife. And then she goes, what is that in the back hanging out of the trunk? And I was like, oh, I got you a sewing machine. She's like, you bought me a sewing machine? I'm like, I didn't buy it. And no, it's like so I had somebody restore the wood and do all of that before, because I was living in an apartment. But now that I've done the intensives, so I got behind me, I have my little pouch from Patty.
Yeah. With the Maker Camp I love that she did that. That is the coolest thing.
So I have the ability. Now I just have to fold open the Singer sewing machine and start doing it. Like everything else, just more time. I gotta.
Just start. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
Jimmy,
I always
just start.
I always think of DeResta when he says, just start, make something every day. And meanwhile, he's got the cars, he's got his leather supply area, he's got the machinery on the main street. Like those are just 3 places.
The sawmill at the graveyard house.
4. So where do you start?
Right.
Like, oh, okay, I'm going to do something today. I would be so overwhelmed. I still got to clean this mess up. Like, all of this nonsense.
Tom, there's a reason the camera's facing the way it's facing in here, okay? All right. Yeah. But that's actually that's kind of a nice thing. Like,
it's great.
To be able to be overwhelmed by what you have available to you to the point of I don't know where to start is a gift, right?
Absolutely.
To have the means, to have the equipment and the knowledge and skills that you have all these options is the coolest part. I mean, there are sometimes I just come down to the shop with the goal of I'm going to do this, and I end up spending an hour kind of cleaning up, putting everything away, and and as I'm walking around, I'm like thinking through projects, and by the time the shop's clean, I've gone a totally different direction than I anticipated. But just being in the space that you've created for yourself just is so motivational in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, like you said, being in the space. And if you don't have the equipment, if you don't have the space, that's what makes these events so great. So I'm not going to invest in, the leather sewing machine or all the other leather things. I think I got a coupon for Weaver, and I'm like, listen, I can't buy anything more. Like, I'm not using tools that I already have. So there was a grandfather and grandson, and I gave him my coupon, and I'm like, please. And he's like, are you certain? And I'm like, yes, I'm not going to utilize it. You want to get something. And I think he ended up getting the stave machine.
Yeah.
That cuts away the end of the belt so you can flip it over. And he goes, I want to buy it new. But I was like, yeah, use the coupon. Maybe maybe this can work for you.
Yeah.
But going to those events and all the events that the Blackthorn has, those winter intensives, now you don't need to invest in all of the machinery. And you have some of the most creative, knowledgeable people to just say, hey, try it like this, or work it like this, or I see you struggling, or hey, can I? So Curtis Bone, I think, is that his last name? Bone?
Yeah.
I'm pronouncing.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
He does the copper folding.
Yep.
Beautiful work. So, of course, I have to do my own thing at Maker Camp. And I went and I got the hat made by Jesse, and I formed my own hat. And I said, I want to get a cigar holder clip on the side. So I had bought a piece of brass up to Maker Camp, and I was asking the guys in the forging tent, and they're like, yeah, nah, I don't think that's banging this out. Maybe you go talk to Curtis. I talked to Curtis, and he goes, oh, yeah, we can do that. No problem. He formed it in probably 20 minutes. If I did it myself, it would have taken me all weekend. And now I have a clip that goes inside the hat band that holds a cigar, and I use the top. Jesse helped me form it so it's an ashtray, so I can.
That is the coolest. But that is the coolest. You go there with an idea, and there's someone there to help execute. No matter what it is, no matter what facet of your imagination you've utilized to come up with this idea, there's someone there that can help make it happen.
Yeah, so many creative people, and it's not just, creative artistically, it's that they can make it reality. That's
that's the
magic.
biggest skill. Exactly. Yeah. You can picture anything you want in your head. Turning it into something physical and tangible that is like, hey, this is exactly what I had in mind. That's the coolest. That's the most sad. I mean, that's why we do it. That's why we do everything we do.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And that's why we move. That's why I move around so fast with stuff, because like I do this and I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted. This is great. All right, now I got to do something. Now I got to do it again. I want that again.
It's such an awesome feeling. I mean, that I don't know if it's a dopamine rush or a high or the flow or whatever you want to call it, but it's just awesome. And to be able to share that with somebody else and have that connection, and that's part of why I started the podcast, is because to have that shared experience and connects you with somebody, that's what most humans are looking for.
Yeah, regardless of, I mean, that's a truth that is beyond our world. That is across the board. You want that connection. You want that, that feeling of of value, or of the, someone took the 10 minutes to show me how to do this, and now I can pass that along. It's a great thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, why don't I give you some rapid fire questions. We'll see what you do. All right.
Yeah.
Pizza or tacos?
Pizza.
Oh, good answer. What do you listen to in your shop?
Podcasts, or if there's a song stuck in my head, I find the song, and I'm an Apple Music guy. I find the song and I hit create station and see where that takes me.
Very cool. What's your favorite podcast these days? What are you listening to?
So I've been, in addition to the 3 or 4 maker podcasts that I listen to, which are this one, Working Hands, and occasionally, well, I mean, it's occasionally. It's like I listen to the once a year Fits All. Now it's about a once a year episode. But beyond that, I've been listening to this show that's got 8 seasons now called Counterclock, and it's true crime, where each season is 10 or 12 episodes of breaking down this crazy crime or event or whatever that happened. And oftentimes a lot of them are like cold cases, and they kind of, more times than not, they figure it out, over the course of the season. So that's what I'm 3 seasons into 8 right now, listening to that. So that's been good. I'll lose track of time listening to that sometimes, because it's just like I'm doing stuff and I'm kind of end up on autopilot, because I'm trying to figure it out in my head as I'm listening. But that's been those have been the podcasts lately.
That's awesome. All right, what about your workshop? What is your favorite tool in your workshop?
Currently, this fixture table, because I do everything on it. This is a 4 foot by 6 foot fixture table with all the holes in the top, and I don't know how I survived without it. It seems like it's just a table, but even it's just having all these little fixture holes where I can set stuff up and clamp stuff down. It's just a big heavy table. It's the center point. I love my machines and I love all my tools, but this is like, couldn't do any of it without this big table in the middle.
Plumb level and square.
Plumb level and square and about 2,000 pounds. And it's in the basement. Let me just remind you again, it's in the basement.
What do you have, Bilko doors?
I sure do. Yeah, Bilko doors and 5 stairs. Everything. Yeah, I mean, I joke that there's like 60,000 pounds of stuff down here. This house will never float away.
What are you most excited about working on right now?
I've got a job coming up that I am starting to design and put together for nothing secret, but it's Brunt is again moving into a new headquarters, and I've got
Didn't
some
they
work
just
to do.
open up one?
They opened up a retail store, their first ever retail store.
Okay.
I worked on that build out in March and April, but this new headquarters is, almost 60,000 square feet, and there's a lot of custom build out stuff that I'm going to be doing for that. So I'm excited about that. It's a lot and it's a tight timeline, but it's cool, it's unique, and it's stuff that I like to do because it's all a mix of wood and metal, and how do we solve this, and using some found objects and stuff like this. So I'm excited about that, and you'll see a lot of that on the old interwebs once that kicks off.
That's awesome. Good luck with that. And if time and money was not an issue, what would you be working on?
I would be working on the same stuff I'm doing right now, except that would be all that I'm working on. It would be the same stuff. It's fine. I know these are rapid fire, but this is one of those things that I get asked a lot because of sort of the two facets of, like, I have my day job and I have my own, work. And it's, well, don't you want to go off and just do your own thing? You ever want to get away from your day job? I honestly can say that I can't see a world. I can't imagine a world where I'm not still involved in that in some way, because it's been my life for so long, and I have such good relationships with these people that I work with and work for. I can't imagine getting away from it. So I think even if time and money weren't an issue, I still think I'd be doing stuff, a couple days a week for them, because it's just stuff I enjoy. But same stuff, just more of it with no restrictions.
Awesome.
Which I think is good. I think
yeah.
I'm happy with that answer. That's a good way to live, I think, right?
Yeah. What more could you want?
I mean, listen, Tom, I'd have like a 100 by 200 building in my backyard, but aside from that, same stuff.
Would you have a shower curtain around your bed?
Yeah, well, the whole house would turn into the shower. Listen, I've turned down machines that I would have to like put a hole up into my living room to fit them into the basement. And those are always tough to turn down because it seems like such a good idea. Like, what's this coffee table? This is pretty unique. Well, it's actually the top half of this press that I have downstairs, just coming up through I always get nixed on that. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, I don't know, we can't do that. I don't know. But if we had the shower curtain, maybe it would work. I don't know.
Lucas, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Where can people find all your work or what you want to share?
I'm on Instagram at manmade in MA. That's man with 2 N's. As I said, that's the family name. Same thing on Facebook. Same thing on YouTube. I'm trying to make it easy.
All right. Nice and easy. Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much for having me. This was a blast. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, good, man. I'm glad. And it's always nice to chat with you. So
you too.
It was a fun time.
Well, hopefully I'll see you again before camp.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, I'm going to be at the Rest-A-Cart, and I hope to have the Santa Maria grill, which you got to see that thing.
I can't wait. Yeah, I think we're going to go up for that.
All right, I'm not going to have a cart, but I'll have the grill.
Listen, that's fine. It's a fine trade-off, I think.
All right, thanks again.
Thanks, Tom.
I want to thank Lucas again for joining me on Create and Connect podcast. Go check out his Instagram or YouTube at manmade.in man with 2 N's. And it's just really great to connect with a guy like Lucas who really enjoys what he's doing. He enjoys the community that he's in, and he enjoys learning, but not just learning for himself, learning to give back. So I want to thank him again, and I want to thank you, the listener, for joining me on another episode of Create and Connect. Remember, keep creating, keep connecting.